Shabbat Shalom. This week, this coming Shabbat, is actually the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. And so we suspend the regular Torah readings that we read according to the cycle, and instead we read a section from Leviticus chapter 16. And actually this chapter, the entire chapter is read, and it describes the rituals that were done in the temple and in the tabernacle on this very day. The Day of Atonement, of course, is prescribed in the Bible. And this chapter lays out the original commandments that Moses gave from God to Aaron, teaching him how he is the high priest, and of course his children, his descendants after him, that will be the high priests, that will be the high priests in the temple, what they're supposed to do on this day. Now, there's a series of sacrifices, there's a series of different garments that the high priest puts on, etc. I'd like to just focus on a few elements here. First of all, Aaron is commanded to bring two different types of sacrifices. One is a sacrifice that he is going to bring as an atonement for himself and for his house. This we see in verse 6. Aaron shall offer the bull as a sin offering for himself and shall make atonement for himself and for his house. And this is separate from the sacrifices that Aaron is going to bring, that he receives from the people and that he is going to bring on behalf of the people. And I think this is a very interesting point, because the person himself who is going to be representing the people of Israel before God has to first get forgiveness as a person. He must first do his best to purify himself and to shed himself of his sins before he can appear before God to represent the children, the people of Israel, and ask for atonement for their sins. The next step is 2 goats, and this is a very, very interesting and unprecedented sort of sacrifice. Then you shall take the 2 goats and set them before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And Aaron shall cast lots over the 2 goats, one lot for the Lord and the other for Azazel. Now, Azazel is an unusual word, and there's differences of opinion as to what it actually means. Some people associate Azazel with hell or with the devil or something evil in that sort of connotation. Some associated with a place, a barren mountain, some place that actually existed perhaps in the desert. And that later on, when they were in Israel, a barren hill or desert area is designated as this same Azazel. And Aaron shall present the goat on which the lot fell for the Lord, and use it as a sin offering. But the goat on which the lot fell for Azazel shall be presented alive before the Lord to make atonement over it, that it may be sent away into the wilderness to Azazel. Then we have the description of the actual sacrifices that take place in the temple. And then we have the conclusion of this ceremony with the goats in verse 21. And Aaron shall lay both his hands on the head of the live goat and confess over it all the iniquities of the people of Israel and all their transgressions, all their sins. And he shall put them on the head of the goat and send it away into the wilderness by the hand of a man who is in readiness. The goat shall bear all their iniquities on itself to a remote area, and he shall let the goat go free in the wilderness. Clearly, this is a very symbolic ceremony, and we have 2 goats here that are equal. There's no difference between the goats, and indeed, the high priest, by use of lots, which is, of course, a game of chance, is going to, through a total random selection, choose which goat is going to be brought as a sacrifice to God in a normal way of sacrifice, and which is going to be deemed this goat for the Azazel and will be sent off into the wilderness. And that in itself is an important message. The goats themselves are merely symbols. There is really no difference between them. It is the content, is the idea, is the symbol that we put upon these goats that is going to distinguish them. Now, what Aaron essentially is doing is, in a symbolic way, he is gathering up the sins of the nation of Israel, the entire nation. It is the holiest day of the year. The entire nation has gathered. They have confessed their sins. They have asked for forgiveness. And in a symbolic way, he is gathering those sins, placing them on the head of the goat, and sending him out of the temple. Now, there are those who see just the very act of driving the goat out of the temple as the essence of this ceremony. The sins are no longer welcome. The sins have been driven out of the temple. The nation of Israel and the temple of Israel and Jerusalem, the land of Israel, all of this has been cleansed because we have transferred the sins onto this goat. And in fact, some have pointed out that the reason why this goat is not sacrificed is because if we now say that the sins of the nation are on this goat, by sacrificing, we are going to be defiling the temple, we are going to be defiling God, because the last thing we want to do, of course, is to bring a sacrifice to God, which represents sin. Sacrifice in and of itself is supposed to represent atonement, forgiveness. Sacrifice, it is not supposed to represent the sin itself as a way of getting rid of the sin. Another explanation is that let's take a look at where this goat is being sent. It's being sent to the wilderness. That the goat itself represents, now that the sins are on this goat, the goat itself represents evil, represents the existence of evil in this world. And we know that God created a world of both good and evil. God actually created evil. He created human beings with the capability of choosing between good and evil. And by sending these sins off into the wilderness, you're sending them to an area that is empty, which in and of itself is a representation of evil. Not in the sense of an influence or an essence of itself, but evil as the absence of good. In the same way that the wilderness is the absence of life, the wilderness is the absence of good and therefore represents evil. One of the things that I note in the English translation that I've used, it says here, "He shall let the goat go free in the wilderness." Now, the actual Hebrew for this verse is "Vishalach et hasair bamidbar." The word "vishalach," and you should send the goat to the desert. Now, "vishilach," excuse me, you shall send off the goat to the desert. Now, that word does not necessarily say "go free." It can imply go free if you're sending them off to the desert, but it's ambiguous. And indeed, there's a dispute between our sages as to whether this goat is actually released or if he is sent off a cliff. Indeed, one of the interpretations of the word Azazel is that it is a cliff. It's a mountain. It's an empty, barren mountain. And so then the procedure is not just that you send him off to the wilderness and let him roam freely, but that you take him to the edge of a cliff in the wilderness and you throw him off the edge of the cliff and in the process break the goat's neck. So it's not just a question of letting him wander in the wilderness, but of actually killing the goat. And I personally think that this second interpretation is a much more powerful one, and I think has more meaning, because what we are trying to do is not just abandon the evil, abandon the sin, send it out of our midst, but what we are trying to do is destroy it. And while we are not able to destroy evil from its existence in the world, the potential to do evil, the evil as a theory exists, we as human beings should always be in a struggle to drive evil out of our midst, and even more than that, to destroy evil that we encounter. And as we come before God on this Day of Atonement, we are not only coming before God as individuals. Please, God, forgive us our individual sins. May the evil acts that we have done, may they be erased, may they be driven from within us. We're not only coming as a nation of Israel that is saying, get rid of the evil from within us, we are asking for forgiveness. But there is a universal message here as well. On the Day of Atonement, we are seeking a world where we can overpower the evil, where we are able to collect the evil, to collect the sin, and throw it out from within our midst. And I think this is an image that is both powerful and encouraging. And it's an image that we need to take with us, not only have with us on the Day of Atonement, but take with us every single day of the year. This throwing the sins onto the head of the goat and sending him out to the wilderness, or killing him in the wilderness, this is an image that we should carry with us as each and every one of us as individuals encounter evil where we may find it. Shabbat Shalom from Samaria.